This is Madeline Boland presenting my research project for English 251 with Dr. Sides. Christianity and slavery. This semester, we read several things that spoke about slavery, including, but not limited to, Mary Rowlandson, Phillis Wheatley, Ellen Watkins Harper, and Harriet Jacobs. Many of these writings about slavery mention Christianity, Christian slave owners. Today, I'm going to show you that slavery is still happening, and Christians are still not accepting the fact that slavery is happening in our world today and is still wrong. In Mary Rowlandson, A Narrative of the Captivity and Restoration, she wrote, she was about 10 years old and taken from the door at first by a praying Indian, and afterwards sold for a gun. This Indian was praying to God, and that tells me that he was a Christian, but he was capturing and he owned slaves. In Phillis Wheatley's poem on being brought from Africa to America, she writes, "Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train." I feel here she is specifically pointing out that everyone alike is made in the image of God. No one is better or more worthy of happiness than the rest of them, and because of that, no person should own another person. No person should be a slave. Harriet Jacobs talks about Christian slaves in a lot of her writing. Christian slave owners in a lot of her writing. Jacobs wrote, "My mistress had taught me the precepts of God's word. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Whatsoever ye would that man should do unto you, do ye even so to them. But I was never her slave, and I suppose she did not recognize me as her neighbor." She writes later on, "The condition of a slave confuses all principles of morality, and in fact renders the practice impossible." Here she is talking about Christianity and slavery. If Christians are supposed to love thy neighbor as thyself, and they own a person, then who is considered a neighbor? How does someone define a person who is made in the image of God, not a neighbor? Back then, as we've seen, many people thought to be Christians were slave owners, and Christians did not want to give that up. I recently asked 100 people through work and social media if they thought slavery was still happening today. Here's what a few of them said. In most African and Middle Eastern nations, slavery is still happening. Another person said slavery is happening, but it's not in the U.S. I even had several people tell me that slavery is not happening anywhere, in any way. I consider a lot of these people Christians, and they go to church, and they don't feel like slavery is happening. Someone even told me to go to any bad part of town with drugs or gangs, and you'll see all sorts of slavery. That hit me hard. I hadn't really thought about it that way before. I knew slavery was happening in the U.S., but it literally is happening right under our noses. Today, there are more forms of slavery than there ever have been. This was taken from antislavery.org. Slavery includes, but is not limited to, human trafficking, forced labor, bonded labor, child slavery, child and forced marriages, domestic slavery, and slavery in supply chains. Slavery is rampant in the United States and across the world, and it's growing every day. Historically, individuals forced into slavery were highly valuable to slave owners, as it was very difficult to capture and send them to the U.S. Today, however, the supply and demand for slaves are high, but the cost is low. Through the eyes of modern slaveholders, it's easy to ensnare individuals and force them into slavery, which renders them easily disposable. In 1850, an average slave cost about $40,000 in today's money. Worldwide, the average price for a slave today is only $90. $90 for a human life. Not that $40,000 was a good price, but $90 today, somebody can pay $90 and own another person. While there are so many amazing organizations helping to end slavery, Christians aren't doing enough. And like I mentioned earlier, some don't even feel like slavery is still happening today. Throughout the semester, we read several works talking about or mentioning slavery. Harriet Jacobs, in particular, wrote about Christianity and slavery. How can someone say, "Love thy neighbor as thyself," and then own a person? From the beginning of slavery, Christians played a big role, and while lots of Christian organizations try to stop modern slavery, Christians as a whole aren't doing enough. Slavery existed in the time of Harriet Jacobs, and it still exists today.